The Rose Bowl is 2 days away, and it is a Monday. So it's time for a Boren Blitz, but it's not a normal Boren Blitz on the podcast daily because we're so close to Ohio State and Oregon. That's Zach Boren. I am Austin Ward. Zach, what's the mood? What's the mentality? 48 hours away from the quarterfinals in the Rose Bowl.
I mean, it's go time, right? Like, I don't know if I've been this juiced for a game in a long time. I mean, you could maybe talk about the 22 Georgia game just because of the way the season ended and the chip on the shoulder. But man, it's like after that Tennessee game, I'm chomping at the bit to see what this Ohio State football team is going to do again. And I think, that confidence is moving through the team. It's moving through the locker room. Like, I think you can feel it. Obviously, the national media feels it because now everyone's talking about how great this Ohio State team is when just, before the Tennessee game, everyone was doubting them and saying they thought Tennessee was going to come in and win that football game. So, man, I'm ready. You got New Year's Eve in between New Year's Day. So there's so much going on. But for all of Buckeye Nation, I know everyone's so excited.
So, Zach, you mentioned there, we spent a lot of time in the 3 weeks leading up to Tennessee. How will the Buckeyes respond? How will they handle the criticism? How can they go prove somebody wrong? Is that chip on their shoulder? How will that manifest itself in that game? And I think they responded with the kind of laser focus that you want to see and hunger and physicality and aggression and energy. Like that part was all great. And now it's the complete opposite. As you mentioned, the national media is patting Ohio State on the back. They're favored to win this game. There's not, angry conversation about Ryan Day's job security. So, I don't know that we can completely ignore the mentality again for this game, but the challenge is completely different.
It is completely different. And I think you look across college football and there's different ways a team will act, right? One is a team has no confidence at all. They know they're going to go in and get beat, right? Another one is, hey, listen, they're trying to prove people wrong, which I think Ohio State falls in that category. You have another one of a team just kind of going through the motions, knowing that they're really good. And I think some people would argue that's the Ohio State team that was Michigan, right? That when you went in there. And then you've got teams that are super cocky that think they can beat anyone on any day, and they're really not that good. I don't think that's Ohio State team. And then number 5, in my opinion, is the most dangerous of them all, is a very confident team that knows, hey, listen, we're going to beat your ass no matter what. Let's line up on the field. It doesn't matter what time of day, where we're at, whatever it is. And I think that Ohio State team's starting to trend that way. I would think they're maybe caught up in the middle of still trying to prove some of those people wrong and have a chip on their shoulder and being super confident. You just hope they're not that overly confident team, that team that I talked about, that you see so many teams fall in that trap of tons of 5-star, 4-star athletes. Like you look across the country of like the LSU, the Floridas, the Miamis of the world, right? That have all this talent and just get overly confident and just like, hey, all we have to do is go through the motions. And so you hope this Ohio State team is still feeding off the confidence that they had against Tennessee. You hope this team, I think it's great that they're going against an Oregon team that already beat them earlier this year. You've seen leading up in the media, a bunch of the players talking about like, hey, listen, we know what happened in Eugene, Oregon. We know some people had some bad days. I know Jordan Hancock talked about it. Jeremiah Smith talked about how, that OPI still, he still thinks about it every single day. Like there's still so many things from that game that I think these Buckeyes want to prove people wrong. And so I think that is a great thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Zach, because if you're talking about Ohio State feeling confident, which I think they clearly are and should feel confident after what they did to Tennessee and the message they sent. The danger of being overconfident, I don't think should really exist for this opponent, because it would be easy and it is easy for Will Howard to look back at the way that game ended for him, or for Quinshon Judkins to look back at the fumble and the way that swung the momentum early in that loss to Oregon. You mentioned Jeremiah Smith already, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke. This team beat them. And yes, they were very close, and we can argue that maybe if 5 or 6 things didn't go significantly against Ohio State, bounces the ball, an onside kick, a questionable call, Dan Lanning using 12 guys that prompted a rule change afterwards, like Ohio State could have won that game. But the fact that they didn't may well wind up working in their favor on Wednesday. We'll find out when they get there at 2:00 when they kick off in the Rose Bowl if that mentality is the same. But they're not playing anyone else, which I think is a real benefit for them.
I mean, if you think back at all of the things that couldn't have went Ohio State's way in that game, I mean, it's crazy. You brought up the onside kick. You talked about Quinshon Junkins' fumble. We talked about the Will Howard slide. You talked about the 12 men on the field. I mean, can we even talk about, like, there were so many position groups that didn't show up. The defensive line didn't hit Dylan Gabriel one time. I don't even know. I think it said maybe, I forget the official sack, like maybe 5 or 6 pressures, which I think people are giving them the benefit of the doubt. Like,
Yeah.
there was maybe one pressure all day long, and it was from Sonny Styles on a blitz, because I remember going over it exactly on the show. Like, we talk about the DBs. We talk about the entire defense in general, very easily played their worst game of the season. And so then you look on the offense side of the ball, we can even talk about the offensive line again, right? And this is bringing it up. It's because once oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Josh Simmons. My guy was going to call him Isaiah Simmons. Once Josh Simmons went out, people look at the second half and how the Ohio State team wasn't able to run the football effectively. The offense production went way down. Like, we can now go back to, hey, listen, this team was not clicking on all cylinders by any means, and probably played their worst game of the year, and still very well should have won that game in Eugene. And so there is so much there's such a bad taste in these guys' mouth from the way that they performed earlier. So to your point, I think this is the best thing they could have had, is you play Tennessee when you're basically at rock bottom. You put out that performance, and now you're going against an opponent that they showed you up earlier in the year, right? You didn't play up to that standard, and they already beat you once. And so I think this is kind of brewing to be the perfect storm for Ohio State, because now there is that added motivation, even though they are super confident.
Yeah, I didn't even include those injuries, because not only did they lose Josh Simmons there in the second quarter, Will Kazmarek had that, I think it was a 33-yard catch on the opening drive. I was like, uh-oh, here's one more weapon that Ohio State is about to add into the arsenal. He makes the catch. And then gets hurt, and they lose him for 6 weeks. And now he was, I don't think, fully back to 100% in the loss and to close the regular season. And he played a little bit more, was a little bit more productive against Tennessee. But now you've got another, essentially month of health for him, and that helps both the offensive line and potentially the passing attack as well. Maybe even the run game and the blocking schemes and all that stuff. So like, they had so many things, as you mentioned, Zach, that went wrong in that game, and that includes the health. And they were very close to winning it. That doesn't guarantee anything for the second go round, but this is a unique situation that is, college football going to a more NFL postseason style, where you're going to have to play teams multiple times. And Ohio State's going through this, and now they're the one that's like, hey, it's hard to beat anybody twice, let alone maybe the most talented roster, or in our opinion, maybe the most talented roster in the country. Good luck doing that a second time.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a couple, I don't want to call them storylines, but a couple things that stick out to me from the media leading up to this game. And number one is Will Howard has talked about the end of that game maybe every week since it happened, right? It constantly gets brought up. And so he is so motivated from that standpoint. You talked about Jeremiah Smith, or we already did talk about how he came out and said he thinks about that OPI every single day, and how he wants to go out and put on a show, right? Like, those two things, I'm like, oh my God, like, these guys are ready to fire on all cylinders. But then number three is Chip Kelly talked about it earlier this week. He said maybe the biggest matchup is going to be Ohio State's offensive line versus Oregon's defensive line. Jordan Burch did not play October 12th. He is back, probably Oregon's best defensive lineman. But Chip Kelly's already, you can tell his mind is already going to that matchup and how they can scheme against the Oregon defensive line, which in my opinion, if you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, that's the best thing you could have heard, right? Because Ohio State did not scheme against Michigan's defensive line. They did scheme against Tennessee, and you saw what happened. So now them knowing that, being at the forefront of their minds of, okay, we need to scheme against this Oregon defensive front, should tell you all you need to hear. At the same time, though, I would argue Oregon's worst position group is their secondary. And I'm not saying they're bad players. I'm just saying I think that's where the biggest mismatch is in this matchup. Oregon secondary, I think all of them are under 6 feet. Even the safeties, all the corners are under 6 feet. You give me a 6'2" Jeremiah Smith, or he might be taller than that, 6'3". I don't know how tall Jeremiah Smith is. Something along
He's pretty big. I think he's 6'4".
Okay, 6'4". My bad. I'm way off on that one. Jeremiah Smith, you give him that matchup, especially a guy that's motivated, and you saw how Will Howard and him started to click on all cylinders and take those deep ball shots. I think you're going to see that a lot against this Oregon team just because of that mismatch that you're going to have. I mean, even a Mecca, people don't give enough credit to Mecca. Mecca's, 6'1", right? Like Mecca's a tall dude. And so if you've got a short secondary, like that matchup is what you're looking at in this game.
Yeah, and Emeka had 10 catches in that first matchup. He was really good. He sparked that drive late in the game. It might have been remembered a lot more fondly, his contributions for that, if the last 45 seconds hadn't been so utterly bizarre. But I mean, good luck if Oregon decides, because they have a mismatch with a couple 5'10" corners, like they're going to have to devote safety coverage and bracket Jeremiah Smith. And we've talked about this all year. What does that mean? Then you have Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate elsewhere. It then goes back to, can Ohio State protect? Can they get the time for Will Howard? Can Chip Kelly dial up, scheme protection packages or misdirection stuff for the rushing attack to keep Oregon honest? And I agree with you. On Saturday, when I'm sitting in the Woody listening to Chip Kelly, he was detailing the personnel for Oregon and talking about Jordan Burch specifically in a way that Ohio State generally doesn't talk about their opponents. Like they tend to go with the nameless, faceless, it's about us thing. But they were talking specifics about what they were seeing from Oregon getting healthy up front, and a little bit about what they see from the Ducks in the secondary. And that was sort of like a warning light in my head, like, ooh, they're pretty deep into this game plan already.
You hit the nail on the head. So much of Ohio State it's about us, right? Like they will namelessly drop a position group or a number for when they're going against an opponent, but they're starting to be more dialed in on naming people specifically and saying like, hey, listen, we realize or recognize what this person's able to do. And so, those gears are kind of churning in the coaches' heads. Here's another thing that I want to bring up, and nothing against Jeremiah Smith by any means, because he is an absolute stud. But I would also argue October 12th, Jeremiah Smith was still trying to find his way, right? Like he's 6 games into his freshman year, and it was his true road test, his first one, right? Michigan State, I don't really count. You talk about going into a hostile environment against a top 5 opponent. And you could tell like Jeremiah Smith was kind of hit or miss, right? The second half, there weren't many targets to him. That big Emeka was the guy. Like you already talked about it. Emeka had the 10 catches. Emeka was that go-to dude. Now you look at Jeremiah Smith from where he was October 12th to where he's going to be January 1st. Like I would argue he's a completely different player, right? Like he's come into his own. He started to build confidence, and not that he was ever a not confident player, but he's just starting to understand the game a lot more. Once the mental matches up with the physical in college, it gets scary, right? The game starts slowing down. You're starting able to do different things. Now it's not just about going full speed, trying to get to the right spot. Now it's actually recognizing things, and now you're on the same page as the quarterback. And now it's like, oh, now the home run can hit, right? And we saw it against Tennessee. I guarantee Ohio State can go to it early. I'm most interested to see how the first series goes for Ohio State on offense. What are you going to see? We talked about it leading into the Tennessee game. What are you going to see? And you and I talked about it on the show last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, when they played Tennessee.
Yeah.
We recognized after that first series what we were going to get. Like that's when you knew something was different. I think you're going to feel the same way against Oregon. What's this offense going to do? How are they going to be able to maximize the matchups? I think that is the biggest thing.
Here's how much my life has changed after doing these shows with you for the last 5-6 years. Like I would normally be like, well, you got to go see how Will Howard's playing. Are they going to air it out to Jeremiah Smith? Can they take a shot early on? I want to see what message the Silver Bullets send on the first drive of the game. I think that when Cody Simon put that hit on Nico Iamaleava and shattered his helmet on the first drive of the game, and they got that stop, I was like, okay, the offense was already clicking, and now you add that in. Like they set a real physical tone right away. And then I don't think that you have to go break Dylan Gabriel's helmet to do that necessarily. But I thought that was the moment. It's like, oh, Tennessee might tap out now. Like already.
You've learned well, my friend. You've learned very well. You could talk about that as well, right? You can talk about what the Silver Bullet defense is going to do. And we've talked about it leading up. We talked about it after the Oregon game. Like Ryan Day and Jim Knowles were notorious for saying we are creating systematical changes after that Oregon game because of the inability to hit Dylan Gabriel, the inability to not stop the big play. Like that's the only time you've seen that the defense kind of give up those plays, not be able to get after the quarterback this year. They have completely changed their system based off of that. And so now it's like, what's this defense going to do, right? Are we going to see early on that they are making an effort to get after Dylan Gabriel? And I know from talking to the Ohio State coaches, they respect Dylan Gabriel's pocket presence. They respect how quickly he can get the ball out. He is a very mature, seasoned, smart quarterback, right? And he constantly is putting this Oregon offense in the right position and getting the ball out of his hands when he needs to. So what is Ohio State going to do to counter that, right? Ohio State is a veteran defense. I don't know if you can get a more veteran defense across the country with Ohio State, right, or other than Ohio State. So how is this team going to actually play offense, metaphorically, right, and attack the Oregon defense? Because I think that is going to be a huge message early on.
Yeah, and I think there's something you mentioned about Jeremiah Smith being 6 games in that I think is worth bringing up for someone on defense as well, which even though we had seen Sonny Styles start every game at safety the year before and had been in the program for 2 years, that he had been asked to do so many different things at linebacker in the first half of the season, and he did not play a phenomenal game by any stretch of the imagination. That can go for a lot of people on the Ohio State defense, but for Sonny Styles specifically, you can look at that and say, well, maybe that was because he was still feeling his way out and understanding his responsibilities at linebacker. He's a different player going into Wednesday than he was October 12th, and it's not even close.
Not even close. Like we talked about Jeremiah Smith already. It's not even close with Sonny Styles based off of how much he's progressed with the linebacker position. You've seen James Laurinaitis actually get his hands on Sonny Styles and seeing the literally the progression throughout the year, right? We talked about so much early on about how Sonny Styles was having some issues seeing those holes open up in front of him and fill the hole. And it was playing more like a safety where you're letting stuff kind of happen in front of you instead of attacking downhill so quickly. I would even argue against the Oregon game. We saw those issues, right? There were a couple of runs where Sonny Styles didn't come up and make the play. I think, man, my memory's pretty decent, but not that great. But if I remember, there were like 2 or 3 third downs in the Oregon game where Sonny Styles was like a step too slow, and it's 3rd and 3. And if Sonny Styles makes a play, if he's just a half step quicker, he's short. Instead, he makes a play, 4 yards down the field, and Oregon gets the first down. So to your point, Sonny Styles did not play great in that game. Sonny Styles was still trying to figure out what the linebacker position looked like, and he's a completely different player, just like Jeremiah Smith. And what he's doing now in his production that he's putting out now. And let's not forget, Sonny Styles is so athletically gifted that he can match up with anyone on this Oregon offense. This Oregon offense is so athletic, has playmakers across the field, but Sonny Styles can match that at the linebacker position.
Yeah, I think he'll be the X factor in this one. That would be my pick, but it's your turn for that, Zach. It's 3 and out time. Who are the 3 Buckeyes to watch on Wednesday?
Man, I think, actually, I'll say number 3. Number 3 is going to be Will Howard, right? I think Will Howard needs to put together back-to-back performances on what he did against Tennessee. If he's able to even come close to matching that performance against Tennessee, I think that is a recipe for a huge Ohio State victory. We already talked about what Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, what they're able to do against this Oregon secondary and the mismatches there. Will Howard doesn't need to do anything special. Literally just throw the ball out there, let the guys make a play, right? And that's what he did against Tennessee. Number 2 has got to be the offensive line. There has been a spotlight on them all year long, and they played out of their minds against Tennessee. How is Chip Kelly in this Ohio State coaching staff going to scheme up against the Oregon defensive line when arguably the Ohio State offense line is mismatched, right? Like that's another mismatch. Oregon's defensive line is very good, big, athletic, strong, gets after the quarterback. How can this Ohio State offensive line counteract that like they did against Tennessee? And number 1, you brought up Sonny Styles. I'm taking a step further. I think it's Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs has to be an X factor against this Oregon team. I'm not going to say he played bad, but I would say the defense in general played bad against Oregon, and no one truly stood out against the Ducks. Literally, Caleb Downs has to be that guy. Dylan Gabriel is athletic, can get out of the pocket. Can Caleb Downs come down and make the play? Dylan Gabriel likes the short pass. I already talked about how he doesn't like getting hit, and he's very smart about get the ball out of his hands quick. Can Caleb Downs make a massive play and take the ball the other way on a quick slant, on a quick bubble, whatever it might be? Caleb Downs has to be that guy for this defense to be the X factor, and I truly think he will.
It's almost here, 2 days away. New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl, a college football playoff quarterfinal. What a world we live in now. Ohio State and Oregon. I think it's the national championship game, but we'll find out. It's the one that I'm most anticipating watching and covering, and we're into it now. A couple days away. Appreciate Zach Boren, as always, for jumping on for a Monday Boren Blitz on the podcast daily. Happy New Year's, buddy. Enjoy it.
Happy New Year, man. By the way, the whole playoff format is for another show. We can get into that. I agree. This is probably not probably the national championship game, but easily two of the top three teams in the playoffs. So I agree. But Happy New Year. We're going to cherish the granddaddy of them all at 5 o'clock Eastern. I cannot wait. I'm super excited. Happy New Year, man. And hopefully we see a Buckeye victory.
All right. Looking forward to it. Happy New Year to you all as well. We got a lot more coverage coming from California on the podcast, so stay with us all week as we get ready for kickoff in the Rose Bowl. But for Zach Boren, I am Austin Ward. Thanks for joining us for a Boren Blitz on the podcast daily. We'll talk to you later.